Awesome. So it says we are live. Welcome, guys. Thank you so much for being here. So this is the inaugural episode of the Inside Link show, is what I'm going to call it. And so I'll kind of, well, I can't really point to you guys because you don't know what arrangement you are on your screen, but we'll go left and down and around to introduce ourselves. So Chantel, if you can go first, please.
Hi, my name is Chantel Dedeke, and I am the Chief Creative Officer at the Francis Roy Agency in Niceville, Florida.
Perfect. Elijah?
Hey, I'm Elijah Mills. I am COO at Oxygen, and I do some web design myself, and am involved in IT as well to some extent.
And Wade.
Wade Cohen. I actually just recently got out of IT, trying to just focus on marketing, and I've also been working on some WordPress plugins. So coming more from the technical standpoint, I guess I'm hoping to learn more about the processes and how to run an effective agency here.
Awesome. Well, that brings us nicely into our episode title, which is just creating processes to grow your agency. So there's a lot of stuff here I think that is really important, but I wanted to start off by saying I definitely don't want to be insensitive to the fact that obviously there are major current events going on, but what I want to do is have us spend time kind of building each other up, learning from one another, and then being able to take this and whenever we all inevitably come out on the other side of this, be able to kind of better our businesses in that time. And of course, we have some downtime to kind of focus on that. So real quick, if I can, I want to just read the description for the show, and then I'll jump into some questions if you guys don't mind.
Sure.
So the description says this show brings together freelancers and agency owners of varying sizes to discuss topics that help all of us learn, grow, and give back. The idea is that in every episode, you'll find actionable takeaways to implement in your own business to help you in all facets of your day-to-day. So long term, I want it to be kind of a broad series where people might find, I don't want to call it like self-help or personal help, but just topics that are both beneficial to business and personal. So that's where we are. I'm excited to have you guys.
Okay, thanks
Thank you for having us.
Cool. So Wade, this idea kind of sparked from you. So if I can ask you kind of what discussions you guys had in your group, and then also what kind of led you to the idea of specifically, developing processes. Like what in your own business has led you to this question, I guess?
Sure. Yeah, just the other day, I had jumped on a random Zoom call hosted by another Facebook group and just came away really impressed with how people were helping each other. And so inside my group, I went ahead and we had 3 or 4 of us join up. And it was interesting to me how the conversation kind of went from the technical side of things, which I started my group more around the technical aspect of working with Oxygen and WordPress. And even the people that I've attracted, it seems like they're struggling. Once you get far enough into it, they end up telling you that they're struggling more with the processes and just the project management side of things. And that hit home with me. I mean, that's something that has been huge with me coming. It's like I was telling you the other day, Jonathan, I'm used to walking into a place of business, just people giving me these problems I need to solve in the IT world.
Right.
And yeah, you say yes to everything, and you fix all their little issues that they're having, and they they love you for it, and you get paid. Well, I'm struggling. Seems like I was fairly comfortable in the IT world. I could walk in and I could fix pretty much everything that I ran into. It seems like everything I touch when it comes to web design takes, it's a bigger project, more of a project than just a task.
Right.
And it takes, 5 times longer than I had anticipated. And managing client expectations through that all is it's a whole nother level. And I'm struggling on it. Something as simple as gathering content, it just blows my mind, that somebody can give me a down payment, and then is it my problem that I don't understand how to gather content from them, or I'll request stuff and they don't respond, and just one simple little thing. I was trying to help my one of my clients the other day, set up a business Facebook page. And we got locked out of his personal Facebook account through it all. We were doing a screen share, and it's just like, okay, it seems like everywhere I turn, I keep running into these little issues. And do I niche down and say that I don't do any of this stuff, or is there a way that I can actually help these people effectively?
Yeah.
I guess.
I mean,
it's just,
you definitely have a lot. There's a bunch of points here to unpack. First of all, there's one thing that I personally have experienced is not offering everything. And Chantel, you and I have discussed that. You guys have your specific lane and you excel in that. And we've talked a lot about how her and I are really complementary to one another. So Chantel, you have Hillary as your content director. So do you mind speaking on how you guys sort of pull out content from people? Because of course you can't just start on a logo and a brand just from a blank slate. You have to communicate in some capacity, right?
Definitely. And Jonathan, we've talked about like our ideal clients before, and our ideal clients are the ones that want to start with foundational research and go all the way back to the brand. It is very difficult to begin with a touch point. So if a client calls you and they're like, for your example, Wade, is like, I just want a Facebook business page. And we kind of backtrack that to, well, why? And is this the right platform for your business? Do you have some architecture to your brand? How can we help you develop that? That also lends itself very well into some discovery research for us. And that is where we find the content or the content potential, really. So we oftentimes will get those same tasks or the same ask where, oh, I just want a logo. If someone just wants a logo, they probably are not a fit for us. And I believe, and we really have had to get comfortable with saying no, because at the end of the day, if someone just wants, if a company or a business or a startup just wants a touch point, we're probably not the right service provider for them.
I pick up on that comfortable saying no part. That's,
that's extremely challenging, I think, for businesses of any size without I would say my own internal processes to look, do they fit in my box? And if not, then I don't take them on. But the thing about that is, one thing I will say is, for me personally, you guys probably are all in the same boat. Like, there was a time where I simply just couldn't say no. Like, it was a matter of either paying the rent, buying groceries, or getting evicted. So obviously, what we all choose. But I think as you kind of develop more projects, eventually not only do you figure out what you want to do, but also what you're good at, and then it makes sense to say no. Like all three of us, Elijah, Wade, and myself, come from an IT background, and you know that, Chantel, and it's extremely hard to say no to that stuff. It's like, well, I know I can fix it, I know I can figure it out.
Oh man, yeah.
But the reality is, where is your time best spent?
Right. Well, and saying no is a very powerful thing too. It was one of the, I think, the most unexpected rewards of really leaving the corporate world and launching Francis Roy was I got to say no for the first time in a long time, that just projects that honestly didn't align either with my value system and we have a very structured value system at the agency, and that provides us a lot of initial just checks and balances, where we're okay, this company may not be a good match for us because they just don't align with our value system. It'd be very difficult for us to produce high quality work for them. So I remember the first time I even said no, and it was someone just transparently that I knew I didn't want to work with, because in my previous job I had to work with them. And so when I left and started the agency, they were on me right away about wanting, help us with this event. And I was like, I don't want to work with this person in a capacity that I was before. I never had the opportunity to say no to that. And for the first time, being able to be like, no, this is just not a good fit, was really kind of powerful.
It is awesome. Definitely. So one question I have with the idea of developing processes is, what do each of you, maybe Elijah, if you want to chime in on this, what sort of non-billable things do you find yourself spending the most time on outside of your core services? So if you're talking about website design? Is there elements to that, like we talked about, pulling content out of people, that is
Yeah.
a time sink for you?
Right. So content's always the big problem, right? Because especially when you're building what I would call budget sites, because I'm in a smaller community, so most people don't have a huge budget for websites. And part of that is that they don't see the inherent value in a website because we still have a largely offline economy in rural areas. But what happens is they'll come to me and say, I need a website. And I'll say, okay, what do you want your website to do? And they'll say, I want to show up on Google. And that's it. I mean, that's all they give me.
Right.
And at that point, especially with a budget website, they're not paying enough for me to generate content for them.
Right.
So then you have that back and forth of, hey, what do you want this to say? And they don't know. And it takes weeks and weeks and weeks. And that is a big problem.
Okay.
Just managing the clients in general. So one thing that we've done to help that is establish a pretty rock solid scope document at the beginning of any project that basically lets them know they're in charge of providing the content, what we will and won't do. And that has helped with things like scope creep, which I think most people that do web design know that you have to have the scope defined initially. But in regards to content, one thing we've done is we've put in, hey, you need to provide the content within this amount of time. I think we gave them like 6 months or something crazy like that, but it at least puts a time limit on it to where it feels like it's important to them. Even though it is important, they don't feel like that. So by adding a deadline, it helps add some weight to that. I think ultimately, if you can get people to pay for it, you should probably generate the content for them.
Right.
Because it's way easier. But I mean, if you're building budget sites, you can't, you'll lose money on the time that you spend.
I was going to say what I struggled with the exact same thing. And like you said, Wade, people would just ghost you. It's like they put down $1,000 or more as their deposit.
Exactly.
And then months go by and they disappear. And so what I did was completely went all the way to the end and said, first of all, we have to have a credit card on file. So that meant changing my billing system, and that one that would store the card and let me charge it later on, so that the second payment was due on the earlier of the website going live, or usually I set it to 45 days. And that gives people a really hardcore timeline. And it's amazing how often on like the 43rd day, people are like, oh, it looks great. Let's take it live. But when I just left it open, then people disappeared for months.
Right.
But, before that, the content piece, I put together this big onboarding form on my website. And it's basically just a Gravity Forms that asks everything, like, give me your business hours. What demographics do you serve? What does your ideal client look like? Give me your logo files. What pages do you envision on the site? And it's a 4-step form with a lot of questions. But I tell people on the front end, like, you have to fill this out, otherwise the site won't be successful. And that helps tremendously.
Yeah, I think we do the same, something very similar, but in a little bit of a different way. So we have discovery meetings with each of our clients and phased out deliverables. And, the phased out deliverables are really a part of our proposal agreement. And, each deliverable is obviously contingent upon what the client provides to us. But because we're not on the technical end, we are to a certain extent, but we can certainly get a client only so far. Our job is really to help them develop the content, knowing that they need to have that content no matter what the touch point ends up being, whether it's website or social or a blog or whatever. And so our job is really to develop some infrastructure there for them moving forward. So we will create narrative, boilerplate language, taglines, like all of these things, ideals, services, whatever they really need, so that when they get to the point where they're starting to create technical touch points, those things are already there. Because just listening to the three of you collectively and imagining having to do that, they're just like, okay, well, I want, a website for a pharmacy or something like that would be very specific. Could you just go ahead and throw that up for me,
Right.
or whatever, which I'm sure, I just need an easy or a simple website. And you're like, well, that is woefully dependent on you. For one, frankly, if you're thinking of a simple website as 1 or 2 pages, I mean, I think so. really setting some client expectations in the beginning, having that discovery meeting, phasing out deliverables, and guiding them through the content process so they're hot and ready to create touch points as they need them.
That's, yeah, a great point. I also, to tie into that, I don't do really discovery meetings. I do kind of like the initial meeting, sit down face to face and talk about the project. And then one thing that I heard somebody doing, which was fascinating, is they have kind of a kickoff sort of in-person meeting or like a Zoom call, something like this. But what they do is they just ask probing questions to get the person talking about their business. They record it, and then they take it to this website called rev.com, and it just transcribes everything for them. And then they take that document, and 10 minutes of conversation is a lot of, it's a high word count, and then that helps them kind of begin the process of filtering out the website. And I thought that was a pretty fascinating approach, and a lot less what's the word, like a lot less intimidating to somebody non-technical to have to
Right.
fill out a 40 question form on a website.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that there's nothing more intimidating for a person who cannot build a simple website than to talk to someone who has a very high technical ability.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you're basically, if you're sitting in the consumer's chair, you're saying, I don't know how to do this. That's why I need you. And then if those questions are too high level and they provide this wall of intimidation, they're just like, yeah, I still just need you to do this. Like, I mean, so it's really interesting. It's not a dumbing down. I think it's more of a translation.
Yeah. It's a great point.
Because even what you mentioned there, Jonathan, about I've put together some of those questionnaires too. Like I tried out Content Snare. It's a great tool. What is your ideal customer? And I was like, I had all these visions that people were going to fill out this Content Snare form, and give me this information, and then I would be able to write content for them. Well, they took one look at that, what is your ideal customer, and their eyes glazed over and they were done. So it's a process to get some people past that point.
Yeah, definitely. It looked like you had something to say on that, Elijah. You were shaking your head pretty violently.
Yeah, asking a small business who their ideal customer is, not a good call.
I think,
yeah. For real.
I think
and like
Elijah,
for us in the IT business with my family IT shop, our ideal customer is everyone, right? So it's and we've never been in that level of doing that research and creating those consumer profiles. And most small businesses are in the same boat, because most small businesses are just doing what they can to keep getting work and keep paying the bills. And to them, that's going to be a wasted expense because they don't see how it benefits them to know. But when you go into marketing efforts, you have to know who you're looking for. That's the only way you can target people.
Yeah.
I think
go ahead.
I think Elijah's kind of, I can relate quite well. I think we must be in somewhat of the same type of area here.
Sure.
I'm in a small farming community here too. And so you have a lot of great small service businesses, and they're doing well, and they're providing an excellent service, and they're good at what they do. But as far as, it's maybe just them and a handful of employees, and this stuff is so foreign to them that to get them through some of that is very, very difficult.
I had a guy come to me and say, hey man, I want a website. And I'm like, okay, what do you need your website to do? Because I always start with, I tell people, think of your website like an employee that works 24/7 to do something for you.
That's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so I said, what is its job? He said, it needs to sell dirt. And I said, what? And he said, literally, I need a picture of dirt that's sitting on my land and a phone number so people can call me to buy it. And I said, dude, go to Facebook. Just post it on Facebook. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars on a website to sell dirt. And I think that's part of our job too, as designers and agencies, is to let people know what's right for them, even if it means losing business on our end.
Yep.
Sometimes maybe just a Google business, profile can do. I've definitely told people that. I've told them that, look, if you're just trying to reach people locally in the community, Facebook works absolutely great for that. That's what it was designed to do, pretty much. And as far as people looking you up online, a Google business profile is what you need for sure to get started, and we can do that for a lot less than a website. But
Yeah, 2 hours of labor or something super simple like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to mention too that I've talked to you, I think Chantel and Elijah both, about this fantastic just contractor writer that I have, and I take that onboarding form and add some of my own kind of notes to it from our discussion with the client, and I give it to her and I say, I need 750 or 1,000 words of content, and what I do with that is once she gives it back, it usually takes about a week. Then I send that document in a Google Doc straight to the client, and I say, here is what we came up with as content for your site. And it's pretty close, but it's not quite. You just need to edit it into your own voice. And a lot of times what I find is people are much more willing to edit than they are to produce anything. Mm-hmm. And the feedback that I've gotten on that is sometimes like we completely miss the mark, which is I guess just an element of it. But a lot of times there's not really that many tweaks, and then they're really happy. They feel like you're producing more for them. You avoid that awful question of what am I paying you for? Mm-hmm. I never want to hear that. But that's something that I found in terms of processes is really nice. Like start with that onboarding form, move into the text copy, and then kind of move into the design aspect of it. I don't know if that resonates with any of you guys. So one thing that kind of ties into this is we talked about scope creep a little bit, kind of touched on that, and that ties in with the contract. And I've talked to other like really new freelancers, and I've been asked, how important is a contract? What should be in it? And won't that scare clients away? So I'd love to hear each of your opinions on that.
You want it to scare them away, right?
Yes.
It's a filtering tool.
Yeah.
Anyone
totally.
who's not willing to read and understand and sign a contract is going to be a problem customer.
Absolutely.
So.
Most definitely. So that's something that it's like one of those things that you could go Google search like website design contract or social media marketing contract. But I had that to start off with, and then I paid an attorney here locally, which costed me like I think it was like $1,200 to have him review it. And the stuff that he added and changed, it was basically it made that other one worthless. Like it was things like you would never even think of if you're not an attorney, like where like what's the word, like not trial, but where the litigation would take place physically, and like who pays for what, all that kind of stuff you would just never think of. And that was something I thought I was like, people are never going to sign this contract. But he said exactly the same thing. If they don't sign it, you don't want them as a customer.
Right. I agree with that. I think venue is a big deal where you currently where your business resides. And because, let's say you have a client, I have clients in Wyoming and West Virginia and things like that. You certainly want it to be on your home turf if it were to ever get to that point. But also a big component of ours is not just like the basics where, okay, this is the terms of how we're going to bill you and how you're going to pay. But everything that they give you, they need to own it, or they need to at least be willing to say that they believe they own it, so that if you are sued, really it's on them. So if they give you photography or video or language or whatever, they need to agree that that is something that they willingly own and have some rights to, because that's not your job to know.
That's a good point.
It's terrifying how many people think they can Google images and use them legally. I mean, I've had that discussion with several people. I'm like, no, that's not how licensing works for creative content. So you have to watch your back, because they'll send you stuff that you can't legally use.
Yeah, they'll say, just throw this image up. And then we always ask the question, well, where did you get this? Mm-hmm. Do you own this? Did you create this? I mean, a lot of the times we can redesign something that's going to give them the same, purpose as what they found. Oh, I found this, just use that. And that's like a huge red flag to us.
Right.
But ultimately, your contract will protect you. If they give you something, if there's language in there about ownership, and they give you something that really you just didn't check, you shouldn't have to check it. It's going to always be on them.
That's a good point. I'm writing that down. I need to,
get that. A good one.
Yeah, for sure. I think the content piece is probably the biggest for all of us in the creative space, regardless of industry, like whether it's branding or social media or websites. But they all kind of originate from the same place, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's you have to develop the voice and kind of the, like you said, Chantel, the mission, vision, values of the company, and that should guide everything else outwards. That I find that really interesting. Um, One thing I wanted to touch on, which ties into kind of the contract element, and all of this is going to be different depending on your sort of niche, but how might pricing affect the way that an agency would grow? Like being a lower tier provider versus mid tier versus super high end. There's that middle balance. Where do you guys find yourself, and maybe where do you want to be?
I mean, it's the question of the day, right?
Yeah.
It truly is, because I I know like where our value positioning is in the market. Our rate is nowhere near where it should be comparatively. And we do frequent comp set analysis for our own agency. But I think that there also is this what your market will hold, what is comfortable, what is going to encourage client confidence. So there is a balance there. One of the things, and this kind of, our climate is changing right now, or not like from a temperature perspective, but just like a landscape. And I'm like, okay, well, do we take this time to completely analyze all of our services and our costs associated? Right now we have a flat rate, but going back to one of your other questions, Jonathan, about what you spend your most time on that's not billable, if I have to hear that "can I pick your brain" question one more time, and I think that, as someone, our agency is very committed to collaborative efforts. Surely we're happy to do that. But then where does it turn into business consultation? That's time for me or an executive within our company for
Right.
some one-on-one. And should that be a different rate than our other services in our agency? I think it's just a fantastic question, and one I don't have the answer to.
I mean, I'm sure Wade and Elijah, you guys can both attest to how easily, how often people, friends, family, distant relatives, friends of friends of friends would call and say, "Hey, I got a virus on my computer. What do I need to do?" I'm like,
Oh yeah.
"That'll be $110, please." Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
work like that. You don't get to call up your attorney and talk to him for free. You're definitely going to get a bill for every 5 minutes you're on the phone. So why should that be different for us, right?
No, it's amazing. That is such a slippery slope. You start down that road and you can be absolutely inundated with calls. Just, I mean, I have a lot of friends and acquaintances, and yeah, they all know who I am. They all know that I've been able to fix everything they've ever asked me for.
Right.
Right.
And that's a terrible position to be in. It's just, that is not, it's not healthy to be the IT guy.
It is dangerous. Yeah, until you start charging them money and then they quit calling.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly.
Totally.
But to do that, you really have to get past that. I call it imposter syndrome, where you're like, yeah, I can do this, but is it really worth that amount of money? And once you realize you are an expert and that your time does have value, it's really easy to charge everyone money for the things that
Right.
you do.
You know,
That's-
Well, if you weren't the expert, Elijah, they wouldn't even be asking you.
Right. Exactly.
That's something that I was thinking about before this call a little bit. Your mindset plays into this.
totally.
That's a key point, and I know for myself I've been lacking that concept. That's been a big problem for me. Is just my mindset through this all, because it's, if I was doing this for myself, I would see it as just this small thing,
Yeah,
I
totally.
need to throw up a new page. I put together a website for my plugin in a few hours, and yeah, it doesn't look like much, but it works. And it's like, why can't I offer that to somebody else? But you know what? That's not it. You can't make a living doing that either.
Yeah. Somebody in the live chat just said it's like being the only family member with a pickup truck on moving day. That couldn't that couldn't be any more true.
The worst.
Oh, that
Hilarious.
really resonates.
Yeah.
Don't buy a truck. Just stop doing that.
Yeah.
Right.
Or have one that like doesn't have AC and it's gonna break down at any moment. Nobody wants to use it. But yeah, there's an element to that. It's amazing too, to the point about being the expert, that mindset of like being willing to charge. It's crazy once I got over that hump, how often people were willing to pay the fee. If I said that it'll take me an hour, that's going to be $100. People are like, oh, okay. But
Mm-hmm.
if you don't say that, if you don't tell them this is what it's going to be, they're just going to take advantage of the situation. Maybe sometimes with, no malicious intent, but other times people are going to be like, hell yeah, I'll get this done for free. So
and then you get back to the filtering piece of
right.
charging people money gets you better people to work with. Typically,
absolutely.
The low budget and free projects are always the nightmare, right? I don't know why,
piece.
but they're the neediest clients. When you give something away for free, they want 10 times as much as if someone's paying you $5,000 for a website.
Right.
And I think that applies to small projects too.
Absolutely.
I think the exception for that has been, for us, our charitable donations. We definitely do some pro bono work for nonprofits in our community, that, we've built websites for free. We've done social media. We continue to do that. We choose a nonprofit organization every year. And for a couple of reasons. One, because our talent and our time is more of an impact to a bottom line than any check I can write you. And so we can help generate revenue that way. But it also has been an incredible platform that has opened doors for us to new clients. So a lot of the times the nonprofits that we're giving free services to will have a board of directors that has, lawyers, banks, financials, retail, whatever, really CEOs and CEOs that are decision makers.
Yeah.
We can demonstrate our thought process, but then also give back to our community at the same time and potentially have new customers. And it's a win-win in that respect.
That's extremely true. I really admire what you guys do with the nonprofit giving, and Chantel and I are on the board of a nonprofit here locally together, and it's amazing the power players that are in those groups, and you just coming in with a referral from one person, like if one person in that group believes in you, suddenly your credibility is through the roof. So like that time investment on the front end is super heavy, but you guys have gotten quite a bit out of that work, right? Quite a few sizable clients.
We really have. It's honestly the best marketing dollar that we spend is donating our time and our services to nonprofit organizations. Number one, it fits with our core values. I mean, give generously is a core value of ours.
Yeah.
And we have a 24 hours of creativity for change event that we do every year on my grandmother Francis's birthday, where we donate all 24 hours of that day to various nonprofit projects, which also is a really great PR platform. It positions us in a way that we do give generously, and then it attracts customers that also have that same mindset. It's a great match program for us. I don't always have the opportunity to pitch the CEO of a company, but if I can sit next to him on a board of directors and demonstrate what our organization does best, that's way better than any sales pitch I can give them.
Absolutely. Most definitely. Did you have a point, Wade? I saw you were about to chime in.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
It's just agreeing.
Yeah. So in terms of like community involvement, I know you guys said you're in a small community. Ours is relatively small too. Like our metro area is probably like what, 30,000 maybe within an hour in each direction.
Yeah, if that, probably.
Yeah, maybe a bit less. What's the demographic look like for you guys in terms of population?
So where I'm at, we have about 20,000 in the whole county, I believe. Our town is maybe 10 or 12,000. And
Okay.
There's a few smaller towns spread around. So really rural and mostly factory driven. There's a lot of agriculture too, but really, really small town America.
Yeah.
I always tell people I'm in the middle of a cornfield, basically.
Well, I literally am. I live right behind a pivot irrigation system here.
Nice.
So I'm probably, a quarter mile off of pavement. But yeah, we're about an hour from Boise, Idaho. So we're close to some bigger towns, but everything around here is really small and entirely ag driven, pretty much.
So we should probably have another call one day about like SEO tactics to rank in other cities that you're not physically in. I think that'd be something that would really resonate with people, mm-hmm. myself included, and see if we can pull in some folks to talk about that. Because it seems like if you're just an hour from Boise, it stands to reason you could say you're like a Boise web development firm, and same thing for you, Elijah. Like,
sure.
Like Chantel's office is across the bridge from basically our kind of key focus area, but we're both still over there every single day. Well, not anymore, but we were. Yeah. So that's definitely something that we could talk about too. So one thing I wanted to talk about, we sort of touched on contracts and scope creep and like enforcing your own kind of hourly rate and stuff. What about how do you enforce your own policies and enforce your own contract without coming across as like anti-client? So like if somebody says like I'm looking for this bit and you didn't include that in your contract, that can feel very that can feel like a difficult conversation to have, to say, I would be happy to do it, but it's going to cost you XYZ.
Sure. So email helps a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Because you don't have to say anything that feels mean over the phone. But when I've run into that, basically I'm always just, they'll say, hey, this website's great, but can we make it like eBay, but better? And I'll say, well, that wasn't in the original scope. So I definitely can, but it'll cost you this much money. And they never reply. So it works great.
That's good.
But going backwards, if you didn't have that scope to fall back on, you might feel obligated, or they might have an expectation.
It's hard to say no if you haven't already told them that you can say no.
Yeah.
That's the key.
Definitely.
Well, we have some language in all of our agreements that basically informs our clients that they can change the scope of the project at any time. We are happy to change the scope of the project at any time, but when that occurs, we will send them a new estimate and a new contract and proposal agreement, and they initial that. So whether they read it or not is up to them, but it does give us a basis for being able to go back and say, sure, we're happy to switch gears and change the scope. And I'll send you a new estimate of what that will cost. And it really isn't ever a question. It's just a mutual understanding and an expectation at that point.
And that goes back to getting those quality clients. People are going to do that for their own business to their clients. So it seems like it would be an expectation to have it sort of from you to them for projects like this, especially something as like personalized as websites and branding and social media. Definitely. And then one thing I wanted to touch on is in terms of processes. So the overall topic here is scaling. And so what about building sort of onboarding processes and involving your client in the process so that maybe you can disconnect yourself a little bit more so that then you're able to take on more? Like I don't have any actual employees, but since I've found a few really great contractors, I've been able to take on more work than I ever would have been before. But you have to have something for your client to be involved in and for a contractor to know sort of that process. Do you guys have any insight into how to build that sort of internal process?
Well, I want to make sure I'm totally understanding what you're saying, Jonathan.
Yeah, that's a bit vague. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's totally fine. For us, there's never a disconnect between the client and our team. So the initial maybe perspective or what we consider to be business development might happen between the client and one person, but once that organization becomes a client of ours, it's so important that the project team members on our team, whether they're employees of Francis Roy or they're a mix of employees and fulfillment contractors, are engaged. So it could be a Zoom call or it can be a face-to-face or whatever that ends up being. We've certainly brought freelancers in as a part of our project teams, and they participate in those discovery meetings. And so it really is an all hands on deck. Now, that looks different depending on the scope of the project. Sometimes projects are just consultations and that's a one-to-one. But if it's a really large branding project, our content director will be there. Hillary, our art director, Janae will be there, copywriters. And, it just kind of depends, and it really is project to project.
So that's absolutely helpful. What I meant to try to get across was sort of you as the business owner, like all of us here, being able to focus on the higher level tasks and kind of focusing on what is billing at that $100+ an hour rate, and that way you can kind of step back from not the minutia but the day-to-day of the actual task work, if that makes any sense.
If y'all figure that out, you let me know.
Yeah.
And so I think it comes down to learning delegation and triage and prioritization, right? So delegation is really hard, especially as, someone that is essentially a one-person agency.
Yep.
You do everything. You feel like you have the control. You can control the quality. I think if you're delegating work to others, you have to accept a somewhat lesser quality than what you would put out. Not that it's worse, but it's going to be different, and you can nitpick anything. Even if you do it, somebody else could nitpick your work. So you have to realize that being that it's coming from an external source, there are going to be problems. And I heard someone say once that if you're delegating, 80% is okay, because that extra 20% there is you're the filter. So you can take it and make adjustments and ask for things to be different. But really learning to delegate, I think, is the hardest part, because you can find really talented people within, good hourly rate ranges. But if you don't know how to let go of control a little bit and let those people do their job, it's never going to work. And if you micromanage them, they'll quit.
Yeah.
Right. Which they should.
Right.
Totally.
Well, and together with that, if you don't have some of the processes in place regarding content collection and all this, you don't have anything to hand off to your delegates.
Exactly. If it's all up in your
hands. That's been my issue. Is it's like, okay, yeah, I'm to the point now where I've got enough sales that I could handle, bringing on a few outside contractors, but my process through the whole thing is so terrible that I don't have a package of content and branding and design direction that I can hand off to somebody. I know some very talented people that would do far better at the actual design of the site than me.
Right.
And I would love to hand it off to them and say, hey, you give me the PSD file and I'll do the coding, But how can I take, unless I have in place what we've talked about earlier, how can I bring them into the loop? Because I don't have anything to hand off. I've just got this, mix match collection of stuff that I'm trying to force through and come up on my own.
Right. Over the last, go ahead, Chantel? Did you have
No,
something?
I was saying that's interesting. I remember at each point that we did deliberate scale, it was like our customer user personas got more dialed in as our team grew larger. And I think that was, well, first of all, it had to be intentional, because as I was doing a skills assessment of our team, of myself, what can I do? What do I bring to the table? And if we want to scale, who do I need in order to make that scale? I found that the larger we got, we have a team of, 6 full-time folks, but larger that we got, the more dialed in our customer persona got. And so it became, okay, now we're looking for a more targeted type of customer. I think to your point, Wade, because we needed our customer to be engaged in a certain way in order for our deliverables to be what they, from a productivity and efficiency and a quality perspective, what we were going to be happy with.
Yeah, like building that process for me looked like, because I'm still technically like a one-man show, but I have some really great contractors, and what I personally found was I was using Basecamp for a while as my project management system, but I mentioned switching billing systems to Zoho Books, I think it's called, and so I'm in Zoho Projects. But what I did was I spent an entire day building a template and kind of a workflow for every project, and breaking out every individual task. So it went from onboarding form to kind of the sitemap of the site, getting the documents and kind of pictures and everything all together, and having just like a step-by-step checklist. So then it wasn't entirely unclear to somebody outside, like, okay, this is the flow and this is what I'm responsible for. So then plugging somebody into that task kind of gave them an idea, like, all right, this is my little box to fit into, and this is what I know I can kind of count on my task being. I know when I'm done. And so I think what's weird about it is it's almost like, building a website and using the verbiage like we as the agency when it's one man. But it's the same thing with like building these processes. It's like you have nobody going through it yet, but you will if you have it there.
Mm-hmm.
and it takes time to build that. It's kind of challenging, and it always changes. Like I find myself
Yeah.
going back and tweaking the process and asking different questions, and it's definitely an evolving process. I would say you're never quite done with it.
Right. And that comes back to the old wisdom of fake it till you make it, right? Because if you're already pretending that you're delegating these tasks to yourself, I guess, then if somebody else comes into the fold, it's easy to say, okay, you do these things because you already have the processes broken out, like you said.
Yeah, yeah. And Chantel, with a team as large as yours, I'm sure you can speak to this more than I can, but there's something to be said for keeping people in their specific skill set. So, like, all of us here are capable of doing, at least in a certain sense, what each other does. But, like, each of us are better at our own specific task than others. Like, over the last 2 years, I found that I enjoy and I actually feel like I'm better at the sales and kind of networking side of things than I am the web development or the design. So I have like I said, the text copywriter, a graphic designer to do website mockups, and fantastic developers. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's been really important for me to pull myself out of that. Not only do I spend less time on the projects, but the end result is better.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's how you guys operate, Chantel, in terms of everyone has a specific lane almost.
Yeah, so we have 6 people on our team, and everyone does, for the most part, have a specific lane. I think it's also, as a business owner, you have to determine where your lane is, and you have to stay in it also, and trust that the team that you have is, they're there because they're talented and you chose them and they were an integral part of your scaling. We use Asana for our project management. And I really like that. I've used Basecamp with other agencies, and Asana was a better fit for me. But I think as our team has grown, it shocked me all of the things that we needed. It was so much easier when it was just me.
Right.
I didn't have to worry. Do we have enough storage? How are we going to be transferring, keeping, I just knew where all of that stuff was. And now I have to make sure that we have all of these resources and tools for our entire team. And frankly, everyone likes what they like half our team likes Mac and half of our team doesn't. And, these are all problems. Like when I was just working for myself, it was like, I'm a Mac. You just don't even have those
Yeah,
questions.
yeah.
And so there are some struggles, but the rewards are you can do more work and you can do more of the work that you want to do with a team, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's really true. You can take on more. The end result tends to be better. And
Mhm.
on paper you would look like my struggle even just a year ago was like, well, I just bid 2,500 on this site, but each person chops into it a little bit more. And then I'm like, but that piece of the pie is so much smaller than this piece of the pie. But then once I realized, but I can duplicate this pie, 5 more times
Mhm.
in the same time period. That to me was like, okay, that's how you start turning it into what I would consider a proper agency. I feel like, regardless of what kind of niche you're in. Um, Wade, you asked the question in our chat the other day, and then also earlier about niching down into a specific niche or niche, as people call it, like the idea of focusing on one industry. Do any of you guys do that actively?
We tried.
Yeah, I tried
Well,
to. It didn't work.
maybe, yeah, I guess some of probably my biggest reason for going that direction was because of my failings in some of these other areas. Because just looking at it from somebody that hasn't been there and done that, it looks easier for me to niche down into one thing and get to know that industry, because then I could be like, I could just tell my clients, well, you need this and you need this and this,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't have to wait for them to come up with all of this content and stuff. I know what works for them already better than they do, which is a pretty common occurrence, anyways. Um, but yeah, look, I guess listening to you all talk and some of that, and I've known some of this deep down that really it's my processes that need to change, and that there would be a way to work through some of that. And I I've always hesitated to niche down. It kind of goes against what I want for my agency, because I want people in my local community, I want people to be able to come to me that need help with their marketing. And if they're a decent client, I don't want to have to turn them down just because they don't fit in my particular niche that I'm focusing on. That kind of goes against me internally. I don't know why, but it's just, yeah, just kind of where I'm at, I
Yeah,
guess.
if you have the ability to help somebody, why turn them down just because they don't fit in the box? Yeah.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Chantel.
Well, I mean, for us, when we first started, we wanted to be in destination marketing, specifically in the sustainability sphere. That was my background. So that's where we went. But then it became that we had opportunities to work for these parallel industries that really were impacting the niche industry that we wanted to be in. And so I don't know, we kind of expanded outside of that. What I will say though is something that we do is we have exclusivity agreements with our clients. So we don't work for their competitors. Um, and that just keeps our work at a very high level of integrity and
Yeah.
ethics. So we're not pitting restaurants, I never understood how people accomplish that, honestly. How do you work for two separate restaurants in the same market that are competing against each other and do your absolute best work? And so I wouldn't say we niche, but we definitely provide some exclusivity.
So to your point, Wade, I think that feeling kind of comes from our IT background. Like niching down is like the fact that if let's say you were working for hospitals, it's like you know what line of business software they use, you know what their network needs, you know all the ins and outs of that. But I don't find that same correlation in the web space personally because every business is going to have a little bit of a different need. Every industry is obviously going to be different, but even like two companies in the same niche tend not to have the same web apps and need for a website. Sometimes their line of business software does something that the other doesn't. Um, so for me personally, one thing that's really interesting is looking back over the last year, I think I did like, I don't know, like 15 or 16 different new sites, but only one of them was a duplicate in terms of niche. And that wasn't an intentional effort. It just kind of happened that way. So having the processes help you work in that industry without really knowing it. But I do look forward to the day that somebody else calls me up from a niche I've already done. And I'm like, actually, I know how to do that.
Yeah.
Do you
So
guys find like there's a lot of that keeps you fresh, like being able to work for all of this diverse group of clients?
Mhm.
I would say that's
It,
true. Yeah. What were you going to say, Elijah?
I met with an agency, a couple of guys from an agency at WordCamp US last year, and they exclusively did, I think it was dentist websites or plastic surgeons or something like that, and they had like 2,500 active maintenance clients that were
Oh,
paying them
gosh.
per month, right? So I talked to them about it, and one of the big things was that these niche industries have conferences, kind of like WordCamp, where everybody gets together and talks, right? So you have a lot of connectivity between clients and a lot of travel of word of mouth. So I think it can be beneficial, but I think thinking, oh, I know how to do this kind of site, like you said, every iteration of that's going to be a little different unless you do something like some of these companies I've seen, like movie theater sites. There are
yeah.
companies that exclusively host and provide movie theater sites because a lot of movie theaters use the same API feeds and stuff.
Right.
But what they've done is they've templatized it, right? So it's more like a website as a service thing. I think
Mhm.
that can be beneficial, but if you're doing bespoke designs, then even within the same narrow field, you're going to have a lot of variation anyways. So you
Yeah.
may as well just
Mm.
focus broadly.
It's kind of like for us, Chantel, the vacation rental industry. We have some huge national, well, honestly, worldwide players that have these boilerplate sites, and you can see. You don't even have to know who they are. You just look at the opening, content of the site, and you can immediately tell this is by XYZ. There's three or four of those here locally that I could name off the top of my head that are in that same kind of position.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you were saying, Elijah, because I have frequently come across potential clients that are like, "Hey, what do you think about this website? We get it for free because it's our industry." So something that really sticks out to me here is a funeral home, the funeral homes industry. If y'all could just infiltrate that industry, I think that there is a lot of potential there because there are companies that are providing free funeral home websites for funeral homes. I mean, if you think you're a mortician, can you think of a larger grade of separation between a mortician and a website developer,
Not
right?
really.
Right.
So, there are these companies that are selling them free sites, but then they're also getting some sort of kickback from like flower sales
Sure.
and then that site is really, that's not really the main focus of that company. And I apologize if I am like trashing somebody that's listening here. It's not, they're not really website people at all. They're like salespeople
Right.
for these ancillary products that they're getting a kickback from. And so these poor funeral homes have crappy websites,
Mm-hmm.
but they're functional and they're
Yeah.
there. They have guest books or they have whatever. I don't know. Do you all have any opinion about that? Do you see that? Because we see that sometimes.
We see that with lawyers in our town. Is we have a few that we do IT work for, and they have a website, and I'm like, hey, let me build you a website, and they're like, we have one, we don't need one. So I go to it, and it's terrible, and I'm like, who does your website? And they're like, I don't know, this company. And I'm like, what do you pay them? They're like, I don't know, but they put us in the yellow pages, and I'm like, they don't know what they're paying, they don't know what they're supposed to be getting, but these companies get in and lock them into contracts. And then it's too much of a hassle to try to get a hold of anybody to get out of it. So they just keep trucking along with what they have. And I think there's a predatory aspect to some of those companies. And I won't say any names in particular. I don't even think I can remember them. But I think small businesses do get trapped because of the lack of knowledge. They don't really know what goes into it. So when someone comes to them and says, hey, I can give you a site and advertising and SEO for $150 a month or something like that. They jump on it because they're like, oh, then everything's taken care of for me. I don't have to worry about it.
Right.
It's not always just 150 a month. I mean, I've ran into some potential clients that they're paying 500 a month for nothing. I mean, it's a templated site, kind of like what you were discussing earlier here. And it's terrible. I mean, it's just, but it's like, hey, they're doing it and it's hands off. And the key thing is they didn't have to generate any of the content for it either. Probably it's just, a generic, very generic wording and stuff. And it looks kind of keyword stuffed, and it's,
And we just had one that was an appraiser that had a website. And he wanted to move off of that onto one of our platforms. And I went to it to grab content. I'm like, okay, there's a ton of content here. It doesn't really fit with the scope of what we're building you. So which parts do you want? And he literally said, I don't want any of that nonsense. They put that up there. I don't know what any of it is. And when I got to looking at it, it was just keyword stuffed content to try to rank for SEO. And
I've seen that too. Yeah.
That's a bad representation of your business. And that's the key, right? These people need to understand that most people are going to Google your business name when they hear who you are, and what they find can inform their opinion of what the rest of your business looks like.
Yep.
That ties into you guys, Chantel, perfectly, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it sounds to me like we need to partner with more website people because we can create content all day. I mean, and I think that's why our partnership and our relationship with Jonathan and Apex is so, you really have to cross the lines and find the people that offer what you don't.
Yeah.
And he certainly offers things that we don't. And various other partnerships that we have, we have worked with other website firms and stuff. And so it just kind of depends on what your client needs. But, I love the quote, like the difference between a pebble and the mountain is who you ask to move it. I'm looking for my pebbles. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And I push my mountains to you. And I think that it's been very helpful for our business.
Super true. Yeah. Wade, what were you going to say?
Not sure I remember. Okay. I got, there was some good tidbits there that were just mentioned, so my mind kind of went down that line.
Yeah, I mean, really, like the idea of us all staying in our own lanes, like what you actually excel at. Like, I think I can speak for Elijah and Wade. You guys are both awesome developers, and it's like, I certainly am not a designer. I don't consider myself a super strong developer, but I can totally translate the like IT kind of terminology to that sales conversation with the client. And so that's what I'm trying to build my company around, is that's where I'm plugging myself in and finding people to fill those other gaps down the line. And honestly, not even down the line, sort of everybody's in the same playing field. Everybody has an equally important responsibility. That's the aim for my agency. So yeah, I think this really comes down to a couple of, like, the main 4 areas that I had was client management, so that's sort of like who's the ideal client, contracts, how to say no, filter out the tire kickers. Then the automation side of things, like what can you automate in terms of getting things off your plate, that onboarding process, contract generation. You know, it's amazing. I'm not getting paid to say this, but with the Zoho Business Suite, they have this awesome tool that they call Zoho Flow. And whenever my onboarding form comes in, it automatically inputs to the CRM, and then there's a little checkbox that I hit that says ready to bill and then ready for contract. And based on all the stuff that they filled in, it automatically generates the contract for you. So it puts in their name and pricing and scope of work and everything. So I don't even have to do anything anymore. Like, I'm not inputting client information. I'm not doing anything like that. And the only thing I have to do is go basically hit the send button on the contract. And, you know, obviously things change, so it's like a draft. But I love that, like, business process onboarding, or excuse me, like the like building those internal processes, and that automation like gets me excited, probably from the IT background.
To the point of automation, one thing that's a really, really low cost that I use extensively is Trello, which most people are probably familiar with as a project management tool. But they incorporated Butler, which is an automation tool, kind of like some of the other ones that you see that can tie into various services. But now Trello owns Butler. So there's a Butler button on every Trello board where you can enable automations, like if I move this card to this column, add this label and add this checklist. And then if I complete this checklist, move it to the completed column and things like that.
That's cool.
So yeah, you can build custom workflows really easily in Trello. And I don't even think you have to have a paid account to use some of that, but to lift some of the limits, it's like $5 a month. So definitely worth looking into if you want to spend some time to build a customized workflow. The other thing is most form plugins have a Trello integration.
Right.
So you can have those form submissions go straight into a Trello card with custom fields and everything else, and then have those automations kick in.
That automation component is so huge, and then having that project management system be up to date and keep it up, even if you're the only one that uses it. Like, getting the stuff out of my brain personally helps me disconnect at 5 o'clock when I'm trying to sign off for the day. I'm not sitting here thinking like, all right, what do I need to scribble down on this piece of paper so tomorrow when I come back into the office I don't forget, and then the client doesn't text me a week from now and say, hey, where's that thing you said you were going to do for me?
Yeah, pieces of paper are the bane of our existence.
Yes.
Right? Because you lose them. I actually am consulting with some of our IT clients to get them onto Trello, because I've been asking people, like people that are CEOs and stuff, like, what do you do to organize your projects? Because I'm always interested in being more efficient. And most of them just point to a pile of Post-it notes on their desk. So I think everyone can benefit from having some kind of tangible way to put those notes and all the different information into a searchable format, which is super critical. Because then later, if you're like, oh, I know I did this thing, but I don't remember when or how, you can search for it and find it.
And you have an archive to fall back on too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, the automation bit, and then billing and invoicing, getting paid. That's the biggest thing. But all of that you've already defined in your contract, so that sort of takes care of itself. So we're coming up on the hour, so I don't want to take up all of your time. I definitely appreciate all of your fantastic insight. Hopefully there's at least some tidbits each of you guys can pull out, and anybody watching, hopefully this has been beneficial for you. Hopefully we can come up with another topic title that everyone finds interesting and continue this. I've really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Same here.
You guys.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Very good.
Been a pleasure. Thank you.